Welcome to Whispers of Asia, where ancient spirits never sleep and the dead never truly leave. Here we wander through the sacred, the forbidden, and the forgotten, where ritual becomes curse and love becomes haunting. Tonight, we descend into the shadowed heart of rural Thailand, where one man's grief dares to challenge the divine order of death itself. This is a tale of jasmine-scented air, of footsteps that echo when no one walks, and of a wife whose soul refused to leave, because love had turned to vengeance, and life had not finished with her yet. When a body is kept too long, the spirit lingers, and when that spirit dies with child, it comes back with a hunger. This is the story of what happens when you wait too long to let go. This is the 9th night after her death. In the remote village of Ban Nong Pai, the sun burned low behind the tamarind trees, casting long shadows across the fields of dry grass and cracked soil. Crows circled above the funeral pavilion like silent omens, while incense drifted in thick, lazy spirals through the hot Isaan air. Korn stood barefoot beside his wife's coffin, unmoving. His white mourning clothes clung damp to his skin, soaked more with grief than sweat. The heat didn't touch him, nor did the whispers of the villagers, the wails of the old women, or the monotonous drone of the monks reciting the Abhidhamma chants. His wife, Nari, was only 22, young, healthy, beautiful, and dead. They said it was her heart, that had stopped in her sleep just 3 days ago. But Korn didn't believe that. A healthy woman doesn't stop breathing without a reason. Something was wrong, something unnatural. He could feel it. Her face was calm in the coffin, beneath the thin veil of white cloth, almost smiling, almost like she was waiting. The monks had already come to bless the body. The candles had been lit, the chants performed, the offerings of sweet rice and bananas placed beside the incense burner. The villagers had bowed, murmured their condolences, and retreated quietly to their homes before the evening shadows grew too long. But Korn refused to let her be cremated. Not yet. Tradition said the body should be burned within 3 days. By the 5th, it was dangerous. By the 7th, it was forbidden. The 9th night was feared. But Korn couldn't do it, couldn't burn her. Not without knowing why she died, not without saying goodbye in his own way, and so he asked the monks to delay it. They refused. He asked the village elder. She shook her head and muttered something about karma. He asked the Mo P, the ghost doctor, and the man looked at him with tired, sunken eyes and said only, "If you keep the dead too long, they forget they're dead." But Korn didn't care. He brought her body home. The house they had shared stood on wooden stilts, half rotten from years of rain. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that pushes against your eardrums. The kind that listens back. He placed Nari's coffin in the middle of the living room, where the family shrine used to be. Candles surrounded her. Offerings too, sweet rice and grilled chicken, coconut water in a brass bowl, her favorite things. Her photo, the one from their wedding day, stood beside her feet. She was laughing in it, caught mid-blink, as if she never imagined such a photo would be the last anyone would ever take of her alive. Korn sat vigil beside her each night, staring at her face under the sheer cloth. He slept on a mat beside the coffin, clutching the pillow that still smelled of her. And every day he told her stories about their honeymoon in Chiang Mai, about the field he was clearing for planting sugarcane, about how the dog, their little mutt named Zhao, wouldn't stop whining. He spoke softly like she was listening, because in some dark place deep inside him, he thought she was. On the third night, the jasmine began. It was faint at first, just a trace like perfume on an empty shirt. But as the night deepened, the smell grew stronger. Too strong, thick, cloying, like something blooming in a place it shouldn't, like flowers blooming underground. He searched for the source. There were no jasmine blossoms in the house, none in the yard, none left in the funeral garlands. He even checked Nari's old hairbrush, the silver one she used to keep by the mirror. Nothing. Just that smell, ever present, lingering around the coffin. Sweet, familiar, wrong. And Zhao, the dog, began to bark. Not loud, just low, anxious growls, like he saw something Korn didn't. He wouldn't come near the living room, wouldn't even go up the stairs anymore. He curled under the house and wouldn't stop trembling. By the fourth night, things started to change. The jasmine scent arrived earlier, just after sunset. Korn returned from the fields and found the house already full of it, so thick that it made his eyes water. He placed a fresh offering beside Nari, a bowl of her favorite tom kha soup, which he had walked 2 miles to buy. Then he noticed something odd in the kitchen, the silver spoon. It was her spoon, the one with the little etched lotus on the handle, the one she used every morning for soup or porridge. It was in the sink, wet, freshly used. His hands went cold. He hadn't touched it. He hadn't eaten yet. The bowl was full, untouched. He rinsed the spoon and set it aside, told himself maybe he had used it and forgotten. Maybe the neighbor came over and borrowed it. Maybe anything. But something inside him, something buried, whispered, "She's hungry." That night the jasmine came stronger, and at 3:06 a.m., Korn awoke to the sound of soft, deliberate footsteps pacing around a coffin. He didn't look. He couldn't. By the 5th day, the villagers stopped visiting. Some of them came by the gate, left offerings, and walked away without speaking. Some made the sign of protection over their hearts. Some didn't even look at the house. Korn went to the temple again, asking for the monks to return. They refused. One monk, younger than the rest, pulled him aside. "If she died pregnant," he whispered, "you must burn her before the 9th night." Korn blinked at him. "Pregnant?" The monk said no more, just turned and disappeared into the saffron sea of robes and chanting. That night, Korn didn't sleep. He sat cross-legged beside the coffin, candles burning low, eyes locked on the pale shape beneath the white cloth. He whispered, "Nari, were you—" The air was still, but somewhere in the corner of the room, the mirror, the one he had covered with a cloth, creaked, like something had touched it. The jasmine scent was overwhelming now, not just in the house, but in his throat, in his clothes, in his skin. It soaked everything. And again, at 3:06 a.m., the footsteps returned, this time slower. He counted them. 3 steps, a pause. 2 steps, a pause. 3 more. And then, a whisper. Too faint to understand, but not imagined. He turned. No one. But the candles flickered, not from wind, but as if something had passed between them. He was no longer alone. The Mo Pi returned on the 6th day. He didn't knock, just stood outside the gate until Korn noticed him. His robes were torn. His eyes were sunken. He smelled of herbs and smokewood. He didn't enter the house. Wouldn't. He just called out, "It's not your wife anymore." Korn stood on the porch, trembling. "What is it then?" "A Phi Tai Tong Klom. She died with child, unjustly. The spirit lingers, vengeful, lost. And if you don't burn her by the 9th night, she'll find a way to stay. She wouldn't hurt me. She won't need to." The Mo-Pi turned, murmuring a chant under his breath, and disappeared into the heat shimmer of the dusty road. Inside, the spoon was back in the sink, still wet. This time, there were teeth marks on the edge of the soup bowl. Small, human, precise. Korn stared at them for a long time. Then finally, he looked up at the mirror. The cloth had slipped, and reflected in the glass was Nari, standing, smiling. But her body was still in the coffin. The night after Nari's body was brought home, the house felt different. Not quieter, just heavier. The air inside was thick, like it had soaked up too much sorrow and wasn't ready to let it go. Korn lit the candles around the coffin one by one. Each flame flickered reluctantly, as if unsure whether to stay lit in this place that no longer felt sacred. He placed a garland of fresh jasmine across the lid, arranging it gently, almost tenderly, like placing a crown on a sleeping queen. He whispered, "Good night, my heart," and blew out the last lantern. Then he waited. At first, the night behaved. The insects sang their usual songs in the fields outside. The frogs croaked near the stream. The house creaked once in a while, as old houses do, as if releasing a long-held breath. Even the dog, Chow, had stopped growling, for now. Korn lay beside the coffin on a thin mat, unable to sleep. His eyes burned from crying, but his mind was too sharp with grief to rest. He kept replaying the last moment he saw her alive. It had been an ordinary morning. She'd woken before him, humming softly as she folded laundry. She'd touched his cheek, told him not to forget his lunch, and then she was gone, collapsed on the porch. No scream, no cry, just silence. And then her body, already cold by the time he reached her. How could a heart stop so suddenly? How could his Nari, so full of laughter, so alive, just disappear into silence? Around midnight, the jasmine scent returned. It seeped in from the corners of the house, too slow to notice at first, until it filled the entire room like smoke from a funeral fire. Sweet, heavy, clinging. Korn sat up. There were no flowers nearby, no incense, no garlands left from the monks. The only jasmine was the one he had placed on her coffin, now dry and brittle. Still, the scent grew stronger, as if something, or someone, was breathing it into the air. He glanced at the coffin. Nothing had changed. He stood slowly, legs trembling, and checked the windows. Closed. Then the door. Bolted. Then the dog. Zhao lay at the foot of the stairs, head down, tail tucked, eyes wide. He whimpered when Korn looked at him. The dog wouldn't come up, not even when called. He just pressed himself to the floorboards like he was hiding from something bigger than he understood. By 2 a.m., Korn tried to sleep again. He lay back down, facing the coffin, whispering prayers he barely remembered from his childhood.
His mother's voice echoed in his head, telling him how spirits linger if you call them back too much, how mirrors must be covered, how food for the dead must never be eaten by the living. He had broken almost every rule, but he didn't care. Nari was his, and he wasn't ready to let her go. Then came 3:06 a.m. The air changed. Not colder, not warmer, just wrong. Korn sat up. The candles surrounding the coffin still burned, but now the shadows they cast moved in strange ways, like they were swaying to a rhythm he couldn't hear. And then he heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They walked in wide arcs, soft taps on the old wooden floor, the sound of bare feet on aged planks. They didn't rush or stumble. They walked with intent. Step, step, pause. Step, step, pause. Korn froze. The footsteps stopped behind him. He didn't turn around. His body locked, his breath shallow, his heartbeat like thunder in his ears. Then the floor creaked behind him. A weight, a shift, like someone had just leaned forward. He closed his eyes. "Nari?" he whispered. No answer. Only the scent of jasmine, now chokingly thick. He waited, seconds or minutes he didn't know. The footsteps resumed again, circling again, until they returned to the coffin. And then, silence. The candles fluttered, as if exhaling, and everything went still. The next morning, Korn awoke to find the house silent once more. No footsteps, no smell, no sign anything had changed, except the dog. Zhao was gone, not in the yard, not under the house, just gone. And the jasmine garland on the coffin, it was gone too. In its place, a single fresh blossom, still wet with dew. He stared at it for a long time, then picked it up. The petals were soft, real, but there had been no jasmine blossoming in the village for weeks. Korn didn't tell anyone, not the elder, not the monks, not even his friend Chan, who brought rice from the market each day. What could he say? That his dead wife had walked around her own coffin? That something invisible had returned her favorite flower to her? He said nothing. Instead, he washed her picture frame. He cleaned the altar. He poured fresh coconut water into the brass bowl and whispered, "Here, love, drink while it's cold." He lit more candles and waited for night to fall again. That evening, he brought her a gift, her old silk scarf, the yellow one she loved to wear when walking to the temple. He placed it gently on the coffin, smoothing the fabric over the wood. He stepped back. The scent of jasmine returned, earlier than before. Korn didn't speak, didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the coffin, as if daring it to move. It didn't, but the candles behind him did. Every flame bent suddenly, inward, toward the coffin, as if pulled. That night, 3:06 came again. So did the footsteps, and this time, so did the whisper. Faint, cracked, like dried leaves rustling, but unmistakable. Korn. His name, said softly, gently, the way she used to say it when waking him in the morning. He turned. No one. He rushed to the mirror and pulled off the cloth. Nothing. Only his own face, pale, wide-eyed, sweat glistening on his skin. Behind him, the coffin sat undisturbed. But on the floor at its base, the scarf had been moved, folded neatly, placed like a thank you or an offering returned. He picked it up and noticed for the first time that the coffin lid had shifted, just slightly, less than an inch, but enough to let something in or out.
By the third morning, Korn had stopped pretending he wasn't afraid. He hadn't slept, not truly. He drifted in and out of a kind of waking dream, curled on the mat beside the coffin, feeling as though the walls of the house were breathing, slowly, deeply, like lungs filling with incense and decay. He didn't speak to anyone that day. He didn't answer when Chan knocked twice and left rice by the gate. He didn't go down to feed the chickens. He barely noticed the sun rise or set. The only thing he did was prepare the offering. It had to be right. He rose just before dusk and cleaned the altar with water soaked in candle ash, as his grandmother once taught him. Then he set out the dishes carefully: steamed jasmine rice, grilled catfish, a boiled egg, and a bowl of coconut custard, Nuri's favorites. He lit the candles at each corner of the coffin. He sprinkled flower petals over the offering tray. He placed the brass bowl of water beside it and whispered, "Eat with me tonight, my heart. Come sit with me." And then he waited. The jasmine scent came earlier now. It arrived before the sun had even fully dipped behind the trees, seeping into the house like a fog. Sweet, but not comforting. Too much, too present. Zhao was still gone. The space under the stairs where he used to curl up now felt empty, like something had taken root there and scared him off. Korn stared at the bowl of custard. The surface rippled, once, twice, but there was no wind. He moved closer. The spoon, another of Nuri's, was sitting perfectly upright in the rice, as if someone had placed it there gently and precisely. He didn't remember doing that. Had he? Or had she? At 3:06 a.m., the footsteps returned, slower, heavier, but this time they didn't circle the coffin. They circled him. He sat frozen, cross-legged on the mat, as bare, invisible feet moved in a slow circle around his body. The floorboards groaned softly with each step. Once, twice, 3 times. Then silence. He didn't open his eyes, didn't breathe, and then, clink! The spoon fell. He opened his eyes. The bowl of rice had been overturned. The custard was gone, completely empty. Even the banana leaf beneath it had been licked clean. The next morning, the offering had blackened, rotten, swarmed with flies. The rice was wet and clumpy, like it had been chewed and spat out. The grilled fish had turned a sickly green, the skin curling back from the bone. The custard bowl remained sparkling clean. Korn stood over it, stunned. A cold wave washed over him. This wasn't how offerings were supposed to work. If a spirit accepts food, the food should remain untouched, still whole, yet spiritually consumed. But this looked eaten, in the physical world, as if something with a mouth had come in the night and fed. Korn took the dishes outside and buried them behind the tamarind tree, whispering apologies he didn't understand, his hands shaking with every scoop of soil. When he returned inside, the jasmine smell was waiting for him, already thick, already watching. Later that day, he visited the old woman who lived beyond the rice paddies, Mea Tia, the village midwife and bone reader.
She was blind in both eyes, but had seen more than most living people ever would, or so the villagers said. She listened to him speak without blinking, and when he finished, she said softly, "She didn't eat the food." "What do you mean? It's gone." "That wasn't an offering anymore, son. That was an invitation." Korn stared at her. "You've opened the door, and now she's not waiting outside." When he returned home, the house felt smaller, tighter. The light filtering through the wooden slats was dimmer than usual, though the sky outside was still blue. The shadows moved in slow waves across the floor, like tides pulled by something unseen. He walked to the altar. A single jasmine flower had been placed there. Again, he hadn't done it, and he hadn't left the door open. That night, Korn didn't prepare any food. He offered only incense, praying in a voice too low to hear, hands trembling, words forgotten halfway through each sentence. He felt like a man speaking to a god that no longer lived in temples, only in the dark. 3:06 a.m. The footsteps came again. This time they didn't stop at the coffin. They walked straight towards him. He held his breath. He could feel the air around him grow colder, not in a physical way, but in spirit, like the very presence in the room had changed temperature, frequency, intention. Then he felt it. A hand, not cold, not warm, just there, pressing against his back, not pushing, not holding, just resting, gently, then sliding upward towards the nape of his neck. He turned, eyes wide. Nothing. But something had moved his hair. He felt it. He smelled the jasmine, so close now as if she were breathing into his skin. And then, "Why didn't you ask me?" The voice, it came from the room, but not in the room. It was inside him, echoing in his chest, a whisper of silk and sorrow. "Why didn't you ask?" Korn collapsed forward, palms flat against the floor. He wept, not from fear, but from a grief too heavy to hold. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he whispered. The candles blew out on their own, and the house fell into silence. When the morning light came, the altar was disturbed. The incense was snapped in half. The offerings he had refused to prepare were already there. His rice, his fish, the custard, all warm, all fresh, all untouched. He stood over it, stunned, but he saw something. On the bowl of rice, pressed gently into the surface, were 5 fingerprints. Small, delicate, but unmistakably real. And in the reflection of the window, just for a moment, he saw her, Nari, standing behind him, wearing the scarf he had buried with her.
The village woke slowly under a curtain of mist, but Korn's house was already wide awake. It hadn't slept. Neither had he. The rice bowl with fingerprints still sat on the altar, untouched since dawn. The custard had grown warm and sour, yet something in him couldn't bring himself to throw it away. Instead, he stood at the kitchen sink, staring at the silver spoon resting alone at the bottom, gleaming, freshly used, still wet. He hadn't cooked, hadn't eaten, hadn't touched a thing. And yet the spoon waited for him as though someone had just stirred porridge with it. He reached down and picked it up. The metal was warm, not room temperature, warm. He held it for a long time, then turned it toward the light filtering through the wooden slats. A single strand of long black hair clung to the handle. It was Nari's. He knew it immediately. He would have known her hair anywhere.
Korn didn't speak for the rest of the morning. There was no one to speak to. Even the villagers had stopped walking past his house. The road that used to carry the sound of passing carts, gossiping women, and distant laughter now lay dead and silent, as if the path itself had been forgotten. But someone, or something, was still coming and going. The jasmine was always fresh. The offerings were disturbed. The cloth over the mirror refused to stay in place. Later that afternoon, Korn walked to the river. He didn't know why. He carried the spoon in his shirt pocket like a talisman. As he knelt beside the water, he looked at his reflection and felt something shift inside. His face looked different, older, hollowed out. But what unnerved him most was that it didn't quite feel like his own reflection anymore. He cupped the water and washed his face. When he looked again, his reflection was smiling, but he was not. He staggered backward and fell into the mud. By the time he returned home, the spoon was gone. That night, he set no offerings, no candles, no prayers, just silence. He wanted to see what would happen when he gave her nothing. 3:06 a.m., the exact minute, every night. He didn't sleep. He simply lay on the mat, eyes open, heart thudding, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the familiar sound. And it came. Not footsteps. Not this time. Dripping. Steady. Rhythmic. Water somewhere inside the house. He rose slowly and followed the sound, bare feet against the creaking wood. Drip. 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 He reached the kitchen. Stopped. The top was off. The sink was dry. But the spoon had returned. This time it was placed perfectly across the bowl of custard he hadn't made, but which now sat steaming on the counter. Korn reached out a shaking hand and touched the side of the bowl. Still hot, still fresh. He looked around. The windows were closed, the doors bolted, but something had been here, was still here. He turned. The mirror on the wall had slipped its cloth again. He saw her. Not directly, only in reflection, standing behind him, barefoot, wearing her scarf, hair wet, eyes wide, mouth half open, and on her face an expression he didn't recognize. Not love, not sorrow, not rage. Something deeper, something empty, something hungry. He spun around. The kitchen was empty. The bowl was still steaming, and the spoon had fallen to the floor. Korn didn't sleep the rest of the night. When morning came, he locked every door, every window, nailed them shut. He sealed the cracks in the floorboards with mud, covered the mirrors again, and placed a charm bag over the entrance, a triangle of banana leaf stuffed with ashes and dog hair given to him by Mai Tia. She had said it would confuse the spirit. He didn't know if that meant keep it out or keep it in. That evening, he walked to the temple, a last desperate reach for something living. The monk saw him coming and stepped aside. One older monk approached, but didn't come too close. "Why haven't you burned her yet?" the monk asked quietly. "She's not ready," Korn whispered. "Or maybe you're not." Korn clenched his fists. "She's still here. I feel her. She's not what she was. She's something else now. And every night you wait, she becomes less her and more that." Korn didn't reply. He left before the chanting started. As he walked home, he felt the weight of unseen eyes on him the entire way. The jungle was too quiet. Even the insects had stopped. When he arrived, the cloths had all fallen from the mirrors, every single one. The charms on the doors were shredded, and the bowl of custard, gone, replaced by a folded baby dress, yellow silk, embroidered sleeves, one he had never seen before, but it looked like something she would have made. He picked it up with trembling fingers, and in the pocket he found another spoon, the same kind, the same etched lotus, but this one bent in half as if crushed by invisible hands. He dropped it and heard something whisper behind him. "You were never meant to be alone." He turned. The house was empty, but from the far end of the room, the coffin creaked. The lid had shifted again, wider this time, just enough. He took a step forward, another, and as he reached out his hand, he felt hers, soft, cold, curling around his fingers.
There is a time just before dawn when the world holds its breath. It's not night anymore, but it isn't morning yet. In Thai belief, this hour between 3 and 4 a.m. belongs to the spirits, and for Korn, that hour now had a name: 3:06. It started as coincidence, a whisper in the leaves, a flicker of candlelight, the scent of jasmine blooming where no flower grew. But after the fourth night, it became routine. Each night, at exactly 3:06 a.m., the air in the house would shift, the floor would groan, the lights would tremble, and something would move. A presence, a weight, a knowing. Korn began watching the clock, not out of curiosity, but out of dread, because he knew what would come. And still, he stayed. On the fifth night, the dog returned. Zhao was waiting on the porch at dusk, thin, shaking, eyes wide and sunken like he'd seen things dogs weren't meant to see. Korn tried to call him inside. He refused. Even when offered food, Zhao just sat at the threshold, growling low at the open door, as if the house itself were breathing something wrong. When Korn stepped forward to touch him, the dog bit him. Just once. Not to wound, but to warn. Then he ran off into the woods. Korn never saw him again. That night, Korn didn't set any offerings. He didn't light candles. He didn't pray. He simply sat in the corner of the room, knees pulled to his chest, eyes fixed on the clock above the doorway. 3:03. The house was silent. Even the insects outside were mute, as if they too were waiting. 3:04. The air grew heavier. The jasmine bloomed again, not from petals, but from memory. That same thick, sweet scent he could never quite place. Navi's shampoo, her perfume, the garlands she used to wear behind her ear. But now it felt sour, like something rotting beneath the sweetness. 3:05. Korn's chest tightened. He couldn't breathe fully. The pressure in the room grew unbearable. He felt as though he were underwater, soundless, breathless, suspended. 3:06. Knock. Not on the door, not on the wall, on the coffin. 3 soft, deliberate knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Korn didn't move. He couldn't. His entire body locked in place. His mind screamed, but his mouth stayed shut. The knocking stopped, and then the footsteps began. This time, they were different, no longer pacing, now approaching. Slow, measured, from the far side of the room. Step, step, pause. Step, step. And then, a hand on his shoulder. Cold, solid, real. Korn gasped and spun around. No one. But the handprint remained, a pale shape pressed into the fabric of his shirt, still visible under the flickering lantern. He stumbled backward, heart thundering. Behind him, the coffin lid had opened. Just a sliver, but enough. Enough to see her face. Still, serene. Eyes closed, mouth soft. But her hand had moved. It now rested outside the coffin, fingers curled as if reaching for something or someone. Korn couldn't look away. He took a step forward, almost against his will. Another. Her fingers twitched. He dropped to his knees and whispered, "Nari?" The room answered with a sound he would never forget. Breathing. From inside the coffin. Slow, raspy, wet. Breathing that didn't belong to the living. Breathing that knew his name. He ran. Out the door, through the rice fields, down the dirt road barefoot, ignoring the sharp stones cutting his feet, ignoring the branches slapping his face. He didn't stop until he reached the home of the Ma Pi, the ghost doctor. The door opened before Korn knocked, as if he already knew. He stared at Korn, eyes heavy, tired. Not angry, just resigned. "She's almost done crossing," he said. Korn collapsed onto the floor. "I don't understand," he gasped. She moved, she breathed." The Ma Pi sat down beside him, lit a pipe, didn't speak for a long while. Then finally, "When someone dies with sorrow in their heart, the soul doesn't rise. It stays, fades slowly, becomes something else, especially if the body is kept too long." Korn's eyes burned. "She was pregnant." The Ma Pi's head dropped slightly. "Then you have until the 9th night. After that, it's not just a ghost, it's a Phi Tai Hong Tong Klong." "I thought that was a myth." "Only to people who don't listen." The Ma Pi gave him 3 things: a small cloth bag filled with grave dirt, taken from under a tamarind tree where suicides were buried, a red string soaked in holy oil meant to be tied around the coffin, and a candle made from wax mixed with chicken blood to be burned exactly at 3:06 a.m. "It won't stop her," he warned, "but it may keep her distracted." Korn nodded, shaking. "What if I want to help her?" The Ma Pi looked him in the eye. "Then burn her, now, before she forgets she ever loved you." Korn returned home just before dusk. The house was waiting. The spoon within the sink again. The scarf was neatly folded on the bed. The mirror was clean, and in it, his reflection smiled. But he did not. That night, he did everything wrong. He forgot to tie the red string. He knocked over the candle. He spilled the grave dirt by the front step. At 3:06, the house went dark, and from the coffin, a sound emerged. Not breathing. Laughter. Faint. Broken.
but unmistakable. And this time, it was his name she said aloud. Korn. 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 He turned to the mirror and saw her inside it, but not as he remembered. This time, her eyes were open, and her belly swollen.
The morning after the candle failed, the house no longer felt like his own. Korn stood in the doorway, staring at the coffin he had slept beside for nearly a week. Only now, he didn't see a resting place. He saw a gateway. A thin, fragile border between the dead and the living stretched so tight it had begun to tear. And through the tear, something was reaching. Something that once was love, now becoming something else. He moved through the house like a stranger. Every corner seemed changed, like the angles were slightly warped, like the floorboards no longer creaked where they should, like the air breathed against his skin instead of around it. The sunlight outside looked normal, but inside everything was stained with the same faint color of wilted jasmine petals. He didn't speak, not even to himself. He was afraid his voice might summon her, not the woman he married, the thing she was becoming. It was the 7th morning, and still he hadn't opened the coffin. He'd seen her hand reach out, heard her voice echo from the shadows, smelled her presence every night, but he had not dared lift the lid until now. Korn knelt before the coffin, hand trembling as it hovered over the wood. He whispered a prayer under his breath, a broken version of something his grandmother used to chant when lightning struck too close to the house. His fingers touched the lid, cold, too cold for wood in the middle of a hot Isaan summer. He closed his eyes and pushed gently. The lid slid with a whisper, not heavy, not even stiff, as if it had been waiting to be opened. The cloth covering her face was still there, thin and sheer, but something was wrong. There were fingerprints on the inside, as though someone had been trying to push out. He leaned in. The cloth clung to her skin in places, damp with condensation. He could see the shape of her lips beneath it, still pink. Her cheeks had not hollowed. Her skin looked soft, not preserved, not mummified, alive. His hands moved without thinking. He lifted the cloth and saw her face. It was Nari. Perfect, too perfect. No sign of death, no rot, no sagging, no fading color. Just her. Eyes closed, mouth slightly parted, hair neatly combed as if she had just fallen asleep. But the longer he looked, the more he saw. A twitch in her cheek, a shimmer behind her eyelids, a pulse in her neck. He gasped and stumbled backward. Was she alive? No, he knew that she had been dead. He had seen her body go cold, heard the village nurse pronounce it, held her hand as the life drained from it. But now, she looked better than she had on their wedding day. Then he saw it. Her belly, slightly rounded, not bloated from decay. Pregnant. No longer just a rumor, the truth now pressed against her funeral dress, gently stretching the silk. He reached out in disbelief, but before his fingers could touch the fabric, her eyes opened. Black, not dark brown like before, black like a moonless sky, endless, swallowing. And her mouth moved, not to speak, to smile, slowly, lovingly. But it wasn't love in that smile. It was claim. He fell backward, scrambling across the floor, knocking over bowls and candles, screaming a name that no longer meant what it once did. Nari! She didn't move, just smiled, then closed her eyes again. The lid of the coffin shut itself.
softly, deliberately. Korn ran outside, collapsed into the dirt, vomited until there was nothing left, then kept dry heaving until tears ran down his face and his mouth filled with the bitter taste of fear. When he could stand again, he went to Phi Tai. She was already waiting on her porch, as if she knew, as if she always knew. He couldn't find the words, but she didn't need them. "You saw her," she said quietly. He nodded. "It's not your wife anymore." But she smiled. Phi Tai's blind eyes turned toward the wind. Ghosts don't smile out of love. They smile when they think they've won. He stayed in the old woman's hut until sunset. She gave him tea soaked in ashes, tied protective string around his wrists, and muttered old chants in a dialect he didn't recognize. But none of it comforted him, because none of it changed what he saw. Nari was no longer waiting to be mourned. She was watching. And now he understood why the mirror had started showing her face, why the spoon kept returning, why the jasmine bloomed in every room. She wasn't haunting the house. She was inhabiting it, and the 9th night was coming. That evening, Korn returned home with shaking hands and wide eyes. The house was quiet. No footsteps, no creaking floorboards, no whispers. But as he entered the kitchen, he saw the silver spoon in the sink once more. Beside it, something new, a bowl of rice, perfectly cooked, still steaming, and beside the bowl, a folded note. His name was written on it, in her handwriting, soft, looped, familiar. He opened it with trembling fingers and read, "I only ever wanted to stay. Now I can. Let me in." He dropped the note, ran to the mirror, ripped the cloth away, but this time he wasn't there. Only her, smiling, holding her stomach. Behind her the room was the same, but empty, and behind him, a voice. Close, loving, wet with tears. "You're all I ever had."
By the 7th day, the village had stopped saying her name. They whispered other words instead. Cursed, restless, Phi Tai Hong. Some avoided Korn entirely. Others crossed themselves when they saw him walking down the path. Children were pulled inside, doors were shut, faces turned. He had become a shadow, not because of who he was, but because of what followed him home. The rice merchant left his deliveries at the gate now. The woman who used to braid jasmine into garlands for funerals no longer acknowledged him. Even Chan, his oldest friend, the one who stood beside him on his wedding day, only spoke through the bamboo fence now, and only with his eyes lowered. "It's not right," Chan whispered, not meeting his gaze. "She should have been cremated by now." Korn didn't answer. He couldn't, because everything they feared was true, and maybe worse. That morning, Korn returned to the house carrying a bundle of firewood. When he stepped inside, the air had changed again. Not in scent, the jasmine had now become constant, almost a part of the house's breath, but in feeling. The silence no longer waited, it listened. He turned toward the living room where the coffin rested. The lid had shifted again, slightly more open, and beside it, resting on the floor like a dropped offering, was a small, stuffed elephant. Gray, worn, soft. He recognized it instantly. It was Nari's childhood toy, the one she kept on her shelf since she was a little girl. She had buried it in her mother's grave years ago, and now it was here, back in the house. Korn didn't move, didn't breathe. He stared at the elephant as though it had crawled out of the earth. Then slowly he knelt to pick it up. It was wet, not from rain, not from tears, with formalin,
the chemical used to preserve bodies. It smelled like a hospital corridor after death. He dropped it, backed away, and then the mirror cracked. Sharp, sudden. A single fracture ran through its center like a vein, splitting his reflection into two. On one side, his face. On the other, hers. Smiling, pregnant, waiting. That night, he did something no one in the village had dared. He returned to the temple, alone, carrying the note she left him, the spoon, the elephant. He placed them at the altar like offerings, his knees pressing into the cold tile floor. The head monk, Luangpo Ratana, approached slowly. He did not smile. He did not greet him. He simply looked down and said, "The dead are not meant to stay." Korn nodded. She was pregnant. The monk closed his eyes. Then she died angry. She died afraid. The monk opened his eyes. And now she is becoming something else, a spirit with two souls, a double hunger. Can she be helped? Only if she wants to leave, but I fear she wants to live. The monk called two others. Together they prepared sacred thread, Isaan, blessed it, and handed it to Korn. Tie this around your wrist. Tie it around her coffin. Burn incense at the gates of the four winds, and then pray. To who? To the part of her that still remembers your name. But when Korn returned home, the village had changed again. Not physically, spiritually. Every house had closed its windows. Every porch was empty. Chickens, dogs, even birds, all silent. The village had turned away, and so had their protection. He entered the house and tied the Isaan around his wrist, his hands shaking. Then carefully he circled the coffin, chanting as the monks had taught him, placing the incense at each cardinal point of the room. East, west, north, south. He lit the last stick. The jasmine scent deepened. Too sweet, too thick. His head spun. And then the incense snapped in half. The flame died, and the thread on the coffin unraveled itself. Korn stumbled backward, fell to the floor. The coffin lid creaked, opened further, and a hand, her hand, slowly slid over the edge, pale, delicate, bloated at the fingertips, as if soaking in amniotic fluid. He couldn't move, couldn't scream. The hand touched the floor, then slowly turned its palm upward, as if inviting him to take it. And then, a knock at the door. He turned in terror, opened it. No one. But there, lying on the doorstep, was a birth certificate. Old, stained, stamped. It was Nari's, and beneath her name, in faded ink, was a line for child. It had been left blank, but now, written in fresh handwriting, "His name is yours." He dropped it, stumbled backward, and from behind him the lullaby began. Nari's voice, soft, faint, singing the song she used to hum when they dreamed of becoming parents. Only now the melody was slow, slurred, off-key, and filled with something that sounded like weeping. He turned toward the mirror, saw her again. This time she wasn't smiling. She was opening her mouth, And inside, not a tongue, not teeth, but a second, smaller face, weeping.
The certificate lay at his feet. The ink was still wet. The handwriting wasn't his, but the name written under child was his. Korn. He picked it up with shaking fingers, the paper soft and damp from dew, or perhaps something else, something not from this world. A birth certificate, a name, and a claim. His. He sat outside the house until the sun came up. His eyes never left the door, because behind it something waited. Something that wore his wife's face, something that now carried his name. By mid-morning, Korn forced himself to walk to the clinic, the small concrete building at the edge of the village where Narrated had gone for checkups, vaccines, and that one time she sprained her ankle on a broken step. The village nurse, Noi, was sweeping the front steps when she saw him. She stopped, eyes narrowed. "I already told the monks. I don't want to get involved." "Please," Korn said, voice raw, "just tell me, was she pregnant?" Noi hesitated, then nodded slowly. 8 weeks, maybe 9. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because she begged me not to." Korn stared at her, hollow. "Why?" The nurse looked down at her broom, as though searching for an answer in the bristles. "She was scared. Of me? Of what the village would say, of what you would feel." He swallowed. "It wasn't mine, was it?" A silence stretched between them. Then, gently, "No, it wasn't." The world shifted, not like falling, but like sinking into something wet and bottomless. A grief deeper than love, a betrayal too painful to hate. Korn walked back through the village in a daze. Every doorway seemed to watch him. Every dog seemed to back away. Even the wind refused to touch him. When he reached home, the front gate was open. He never left it open. Inside, the spoon was back in the sink. The stuffed elephant now sat at the altar. And the cradle, the one he and Narrated built together long before they ever knew if they could have a child, now sat in the middle of the room, rocking, slowly, softly, empty. He fell to his knees and wept, not just for her, not just for the child, but for the truth that had come too late. He stayed there until dusk, then stood, walked to the coffin, and opened it again. This time the cloth had been removed. Her face was clearer than ever, still perfect, still untouched. But now her lips moved. Not a smile, not a breath, just movement. A whisper he couldn't hear, a sound he could almost feel in his bones. Then her eyes opened, black as river silt, and she spoke. "I wanted to tell you." Her voice was cracked, full of water, distant and muffled like sound traveling through a dream. "But he made me promise. He said no one would believe me." "Who?" he whispered. Narrated blinked, slow and strange, as if remembering pain not from her body, but from someone else's. "The man in orange." "The temple?" She didn't answer, just turned her head slowly and looked toward the far wall, the mirror. And in its reflection, not Korn, but a monk, young, handsome, smiling. And behind him, Narrated, crying. Korn collapsed backwards, heart hammering. The child wasn't his, not because Nare had betrayed him, but because she had been used and then silenced. Now it all made sense. Why she hadn't wanted the cremation, why the monks avoided her, why the Morpi said the soul was screaming to stay. It wasn't vengeance alone. It was unfinished justice and love that had nowhere left to go. He stood up slowly, hands shaking, and whispered, "I believe you." The lights in the room dimmed, the air grew warmer, and the jasmine faded, replaced by something else, a scent he hadn't smelled since he was a child. Rainwater, earth, the smell of forgiveness. That night, at 3:06, the footsteps didn't come. Instead, there was only silence. And then, a lullaby. Nare's voice, clear now, not broken, not weeping, soft, tender, a mother's song. Korn sat on the floor and listened. Let it wash over him. Let the tears fall. He didn't light incense, didn't pray. He just listened and whispered one thing over and over: "I'm sorry." Then, for the first time in 8 nights, he slept. Not from exhaustion, but from peace, however brief. In the morning, the cradle was empty, still. But a small set of footprints had appeared in the dust, tiny, barefoot, leading to the mirror and stopping there.
The lullaby stopped just before dawn. Korn opened his eyes to silence, a silence too perfect to be real. It pressed against the walls like glass, like the house had been sealed shut by something ancient and watching. He sat up slowly and realized he wasn't alone. Not just the presence, that had always been there. No, this was inside him. Something resting beneath his ribs, breathing with him, thinking with him, remembering her with him. He didn't speak the rest of that morning, didn't eat, didn't drink. He only stared into the mirror, waiting for his reflection to return. It never did, only hers, always smiling, always watching, until the smile began to change. By afternoon, he made his way back to the Mo-Fi. The ghost doctor opened the door before Korn could knock. His expression was grim. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked. Korn nodded. "She spoke. She told me the child wasn't mine." The Mo-Fi closed the door gently behind him. "And now she wants to stay." "In the house?" "No," the man said, shaking his head slowly. "In you." They sat cross-legged in the back room, surrounded by jars of ash, bone, oil, and herbs wrapped in banana leaves. The Mo-Fi took a long time preparing the ritual. He moved with the calm of a man who knew he was already too late. "She is no longer just a ghost. She has become something more. A Phi Tai Hong Tung Klom is not like others. She died with sorrow, with rage, and with child." "Can I help her move on?" Korn asked. The Mo-Fi didn't look up. "If she wants peace, yes, but I don't think she does. I think she wants a body." "To bring the child back?" "No, to stay, to keep loving, to keep hurting." The ritual was dangerous, not for the faint-hearted. It wasn't about banishing, it was about negotiation.
The Mofi drew sacred yantra symbols on Korn's chest in white ash mixed with snake's oil and temple ink. He tied 7 cords around Korn's wrists and ankles, then wrapped a final red thread around his forehead. "This will let her speak through you," he said. "But you must not let her finish the chant. If she completes it, she will pass through and she won't leave." "What chant?" "You'll know when you hear it." They waited until nightfall, and exactly at 3:06 a.m., the ritual began. The Mofi lit 3 candles around Korn's body. He began to chant, not in Thai, but in an older language, one Korn didn't recognize. Something older than the village, older than Buddhism, older than names. As the words filled the air, the temperature dropped. The candles trembled, the air shimmered. And then Korn began to speak, but the voice wasn't his, not truly. It came from him, through him, but softer, higher, hers. "Korn, you never listened. You turned away the night I needed you most. I was screaming from the floor, but you kept sleeping." His head rolled to the side, his eyes rolled white, his hands clenched into fists. The Mofi kept chanting. Korn's voice deepened. "I tried to leave. I tried to rise, but something pulled me back. The baby wouldn't let go. He wasn't done with me." The Mofi shouted a new verse, sprinkled powdered charcoal over the circle. The air rippled. Korn convulsed once, then stilled, and the voice returned, quiet, pleading. "I miss you. Let me stay. We can be a family again. Please, just say my name." The Mofi clapped his hands loudly 3 times. "Don't speak," he shouted. Korn's mouth opened, and a chant began, soft, broken, ancient. Words from no language living people remembered. The Mofi's eyes widened in horror. "Stop her!" Korn screamed. The candle flames rose too tall. The red thread around his head snapped. The Mofi hurled a jar of lizard ash into the fire. A cloud of black smoke exploded into the room. Korn fell backward, unconscious. The chanting stopped. The wind died. The smoke cleared. He opened his eyes slowly, his own eyes, but only barely, because something had entered, not fully, but enough. A corner, a whisper, a seed. The Mofi looked at him with sorrow. "You let her speak." "I couldn't stop her," Korn whispered. "It was like she was already inside me." "She is." "Then what do I do?" The Mofi didn't answer for a long time. Then finally, "You have 1 night left. After that, she'll stop asking, and she'll start taking." Korn returned home just before dawn. The wind was still. The mirrors were blank. The cradle was rocking again. But now, there was a sound. A baby crying. Faint. Wet. Impossible. He walked toward the coffin. The lid was shut, but it was moving. Slightly. Like something inside was breathing. He fell to his knees, whispered, "You don't have to stay. I forgive you." No answer. Only the scent of jasmine. And then milk. Warm. Sour. Like a nursery long forgotten. He looked down at his chest. A handprint. Small. Wet. Pressed over his heart. And in the mirror, his reflection was holding a child, but there was no child in his arms.
only the weight, the ghost of weight. And the lullaby began again, but this time, he was the one singing it. The house had no mirrors now, at least not where Korn could see them. He had covered them all with old monk robes, black veils, even pieces of newspaper smeared with blessed ash. But every morning, one would be uncovered, always the same one. The old wooden-framed mirror near the bedroom door, the one Nari used to check her hair in, the one she once said made her look too pale, like a ghost. Now, it didn't reflect anything human. Korn awoke that morning on the floor, still in the ritual circle. The air was heavy with spent incense, his shirt stuck to his skin with sweat. He didn't remember coming home, didn't remember falling asleep. All he remembered was the child's cry and the feeling of something small and cold pressing against his chest. He touched the spot, still damp, still warm. He sat up slowly, looked toward the bedroom. The mirror was bare. He stood, legs aching, and approached it like a man approaching his own grave. His reflection stared back, but not his reflection, not entirely. The face was his, but the eyes were hers, soft, dark, endless. And in his arms, reflected only in the glass, the child. Korn stepped back, covered the mirror again, tied it with rope, turned to the coffin, still closed, still sealed, but fresh marigold petals now circled the base, offerings he hadn't placed, and on top, laid gently on a folded cloth, were Nari's old clothes, washed, pressed, still damp with morning dew. He picked up the dress, held it to his chest, fell to his knees. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered. "I loved you." Silence. Then, from the mirror, through the veil, "You still do." The voice wasn't in the room, it wasn't in his head, it came through the thread of memory, through the water of time, through the glass. He untied the veil, lifted it, stared into the mirror again. Now it showed the house as it had once been, clean, bright, alive. Nari in the kitchen cooking rice, humming, pregnant, smiling. He reached toward the glass. His fingers touched it, and the scene responded. She turned toward him, smiled, but this time something was wrong. Her mouth didn't stop smiling. It stretched, too far, too wide, revealing teeth that weren't hers, jagged, black. And then the baby in her arms looked up. Its eyes were empty, just two holes, like the sockets in a corpse buried too soon. Korn staggered back, tripped, fell, and behind him, a soft knock on the wall. He turned. Another mirror had been uncovered, then another, and another, one by one throughout the house. Every reflective surface, even water, even the window glass, all now showing her. She was everywhere, not just outside the coffin, not even in it anymore. She was in the fabric of the house, in the walls, in the air, and in him.
That night, Korn tried to leave. He packed a small bag, opened the door, took one step past the threshold, and collapsed. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His body no longer obeyed him. A hand gripped his shoulder, gently, lovingly. "Don't go," she whispered. "You're all I have left." He turned his head, slowly. No one was there, but his shadow had changed. It was taller now, rounder at the belly, and not alone. He crawled back inside. The door closed on its own. At 3:06, every mirror in the house shattered. All at once, the sound like thunder, like bones snapping. But the glass didn't fall. It hung in place, 1,000 jagged fragments suspended in the air like teeth. And in each shard, her face, smiling, twisting, changing. She was no longer becoming a ghost. She was becoming a mother, and Korn was her vessel. He fell to his knees again, arms around his knees, listening to the lullaby play from nowhere. His mouth moved with the words, but he wasn't singing. She was. Through him.
The village no longer spoke of Korn. They didn't need to. The whispers had become prayers. Prayers had become warnings. And by the 8th night, most homes had hung protective leaves across their doors. The monks chanted longer. Children were told not to say her name after dark. The wind stopped blowing down the road to his house. Even the birds refused to sing, because everyone knew she had stayed too long. Korn hadn't left the house in 2 days. He didn't remember eating, didn't remember sleeping. The lines between himself and her were blurring. He'd started talking to shadows, answering whispers that came from mirrors. Sometimes he'd catch himself holding something that wasn't there, cradling air as if it were flesh. A lullaby on his lips, a soft shushing sound in his breath, rocking, swaying, smiling. But he was alone, wasn't he? He stared at his reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. His mouth moved, but not in sync with his thoughts. "She just needs time," he heard himself say. "She's not angry anymore. She's just lonely." That afternoon, he found himself wearing her scarf. Not by choice. He didn't remember putting it on, but it was there, around his shoulders, soft, yellow, still carrying the faintest scent of her skin. He tried to take it off. His hands refused. He stood before the coffin for hours, unmoving, unblinking. He didn't pray, didn't cry. He just stood there, as if waiting for a conversation he could no longer hear with human ears. At dusk, the Phi returned. He didn't knock. He just stepped over the gate and stood in the doorway, eyes hollow, face pale. He looked at Korn and said, "You've already let her in, haven't you?" Korn didn't answer. He just nodded. The ghost doctor sighed and stepped inside. "She's almost fully bound now. The 9th night is only a formality." "Can I stop it?" "You could have." "Can I still?" The Phi looked at him for a long time. "Do you want to?" Korn hesitated. She was hurt. She was scared. She died alone. So did many others, but they crossed.
She didn't ask for this. And yet, here we are. The Phi placed something on the floor, a small bowl of blackened lotus seeds soaked in salt and char. If you eat these before midnight, she'll weaken. You'll sever the link. You'll dream of her one last time, and then it's over. And if I don't, she'll finish the chant, and you will become the coffin. Korn sat beside the bowl for hours, staring. The seeds looked harmless, but the scent of them made his stomach turn, like rot mixed with holy water. And from the corner of the room he heard her voice, soft, loving. You always hated bitter things. Why start now? He turned. She stood in the hallway, no longer shadow, no longer mirror, fully present, pregnant, barefoot, smiling. He backed away. She followed. You always hated bitter things. Why start now? He shut his eyes, covered his ears, but her voice was inside now, curling like smoke through the cracks of his soul. He screamed, fell to the floor. The bowl tipped, the seeds scattered. The choice was gone. That night he wandered the house. She followed, not walking, drifting. She didn't speak anymore. She just watched. And when he passed the mirror, he saw her behind his eyes, wearing his skin like a borrowed robe. He tried to leave again. The door wouldn't open. He smashed the window. It healed itself. He screamed into the night. No one heard him, because his voice no longer belonged to him. At 3:06 a.m., he woke sitting in her chair, the one she used to rock in, arms folded around his chest, humming. The candle beside him burned upside down, and in the corner of the room, the cradle moved on its own. Inside it, a bundle of white cloth. He stood slowly, walked to it, lifted the blanket. Empty, but warm and wet. And when he leaned closer, he heard something breathing. He staggered back, tripped over his own feet, looked up at the ceiling, and saw her face growing out of the wood, twisted, swollen, eyes open, mouth wide, a second face inside her mouth, the child crying. Korn crawled toward the altar, begged, screamed, chanted the monk's prayers backward and forward, lit candles with shaking hands, swallowed a mouthful of ash, sliced his palm and smeared blood across the coffin lid. "Let her go," he cried. "Let me go." The house answered with a voice not quite his. "We are already one." And then, in the stillness that followed, his hands moved on their own, reached toward the mirror, untied the final cloth, and in its surface, he no longer saw her. He saw them, Nari and the child, wrapped in his arms, as if they had always been there, and always would be. The candles went out, the mirror cracked, and in the quiet before dawn, Korn began to sing.
The 8th night faded into dawn like a bruise spreading beneath the skin of the sky. Korn didn't sleep. He simply sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, arms wrapped around himself like a cage. The scarf still clung to his shoulders. The house smelled like milk gone sour and jasmine left too long in the sun. But he didn't notice, because something had changed. Something inside him had gone quiet, not peaceful, but settled, like a parasite finding the softest place to rest. He moved through the house like a sleepwalker. The cradle was still. The mirrors had all gone dark. No reflection, no face, just black glass. Even the coffin looked untouched, as though it had never opened, never whispered, never pulled him toward it night after night like the tide. But it had, and now it didn't need to anymore. He sat by the window, blinking into the daylight, unsure what was real. Then he saw it. A slip of paper, folded and tucked between the slats in the floorboard. He didn't remember placing it there, but his name was written on the front, in her handwriting. Looped, delicate, undeniably Nari's. With trembling hands, he pulled the letter free, unfolded it, and read. Korn, if you find this, I am probably already gone. I didn't know how to tell you, not then, not after what happened, not after what he did. It wasn't love, it wasn't anything close, it was shame. But I carried it, I carried him, and I carried the guilt that maybe I should have told you sooner. But I was afraid you would stop loving me, that you would see the child as a mark, not a memory. I thought I had time. I didn't. I heard something that night, before I fell. A voice, not yours. It said I was already dead. And when I woke, everything was cold. I tried to leave, I really did, but something held me here. And when I saw you keep me past the third day, I thought maybe that meant you still loved me. Maybe it does. Maybe it's the kind of love that buries both of us. If I stay too long, I won't be me anymore. I feel myself slipping. Every time I look at you, I remember who I was and forget who I've become. Please, Korn, if you love me, let me go. Don't let me take you with me. Even now, the baby kicks, and it isn't mine anymore. It belongs to the darkness. Forgive me. Nari. The words blurred as tears spilled from his eyes. Each sentence cut deeper than the last. This wasn't a curse. This wasn't possession. It was grief twisted too long in the dark, a love that had turned into haunting, a cry for release. Korn pressed the letter to his chest and sobbed until his throat went raw, until his breath came in gasps, until he remembered something he had almost forgotten. She didn't want this. That evening, he lit incense. For the first time in days, he didn't hide from the spirits. He opened all the windows, took down the cloth from the mirrors, swept the floor, prepared one final offering. Rice, milk, a lock of his hair, and a photograph. Their wedding picture, the one where they were laughing, eyes squinting into the sun. He placed the letter beside it. At 3:06 a.m., the house didn't shake. There were no footsteps, no knocks, only a breeze, a soft one, from nowhere. It circled the room gently, lifting the veil from the coffin lid, flickering the flame of a single candle. Then, a whisper. "Thank you." Korn turned, but saw nothing. Only the candle, burning steady. Only the mirror, empty at last. Only the cradle, unmoving. He walked to the coffin, laid his hand on the lid, and closed his eyes. "Goodbye, Nari. I'm ready now." But as he turned away, something brushed his ankle, a gentle tug. He looked down, the elephant plush, back again, but this time torn down the middle,
And inside it, something moved. A fingernail, small, wet, still forming, still growing. And from within the walls a sound began, not a voice, not a cry, a heartbeat, but not just one, two. His hand moved to his chest, pressed lightly, felt his own pulse, but it wasn't alone. Another rhythm, beneath it, beside it, within it. His mouth opened to scream, and a lullaby came out instead.
The ninth night began in stillness. Not peace, not quiet, but the kind of stillness found only in the last breath of something dying. The house no longer creaked. The wind no longer moved. The world itself felt as though it were holding its pulse, waiting, watching, weighing what must come next. Korn sat in the center of the room. Candles encircled him. 7 sticks of incense burned at the corners of the house. The air was thick with smoke and memory. And in front of him, the coffin, still closed, still silent, but pulsing. He could feel it now, beating like a second heart, a rhythm that matched his own, then pulled away, then returned, stronger, deeper. No longer hers, no longer his. Something shared, something merging. He was no longer sure where his body ended and hers began, where his breath started and its breath continued. He had tried to sever the tie, tried to burn the letters, break the mirrors, swallow the lotus seeds. But none of it mattered, because love is a cord, and grief sharpens it into a knife. The Mo-Fi hadn't come. He wouldn't. Not on the 9th night. That was the rule. No monk, no healer, no prayer could stand between a spirit and what it claimed. And Nari had made her choice. She wasn't seeking justice anymore. She wasn't seeking peace. She was seeking home. And now, she had one. Korn stood and walked to the altar. He picked up the wedding photo again, now warped from heat, the edges curling inward like something trying to hide. He stared at it for a long time. She had been laughing, eyes closed, hand in his, pure joy. That version of her was gone now, or buried deep beneath something else. He placed the photo in the fire, watched it crumple to ash, and as it burned, the coffin creaked, louder than ever before. It was opening. He turned slowly. The lid rose in slow inches, as if lifted by hands, both gentle and unseen. Inside, Nari, but not as she had been. Her skin shimmered like wet silk, stretched over bone that didn't belong. Her belly was full, moving from the inside, as though something inside her wanted out. Her mouth hung open, not in sleep, not in silence, but in chant. A low, ancient rhythm pulsed from her throat. The same chant he'd heard during the possession ritual, but now complete, whole. Each syllable another nail in the coffin of his soul. He stepped forward, hands trembling, tears falling freely. "Nari, please, you don't have to finish it." Her eyes opened, black as ink, and she smiled. "It's already done." Behind him, the candles blew out, all at once. The mirrors shattered inward, and the lullaby began. But this time, it came from him. He was singing, without choosing to. His mouth moved, his tongue shaped the words, and he heard her voice within his own. "We're together now, like you promised." The room grew cold, colder than death, colder than the space between the last breath and the grave.
Frost crept up the walls, curling over the windows, blooming like white veins across the floor. And then the house breathed. Once, deep, long, slow, and every mirror, shard, and window began to show the same image, Korn holding the child. But there was no child in the room, and yet he felt it in his arms, the weight, the warmth, the wetness. Then came the knocking, but not at the door, inside the walls, then the floorboards, then the ceiling, dozens of tiny fists knocking in rhythm from every side, like something multiplying, growing. He dropped to his knees, hands on the floor. "Please," he begged, "let me go." But it was too late. The final candle reignited on its own, and in the flickering flame, the air split open. She stepped out, naked, beautiful, swollen with life and death, eyes glowing with every memory he ever shared with her. She reached for him, touched his face, and whispered, "You kept me too long. Now you must stay forever." She leaned in, kissed him, and everything went white. Outside, the villagers heard nothing, only the wind, only the insects returning, only silence, until dawn, when the house ignited, not with flame, but light, a pale bluish glow that rose slowly through the roof beams and drifted upward into the morning sky, like ash, like breath, like smoke from an unspoken prayer. By sunrise, the Mofi arrived. He stood at the gate, did not enter. He simply knelt, whispered a blessing, and lit 3 sticks of incense. Then he turned to the monk beside him and said, he chose her. Inside the house, nothing remained. No coffin, no cradle, no spoon, no letter. Only one footprint burned into the floor, a baby's foot, facing inward.
The villagers came at sunrise, not out of duty, not out of bravery, but because they felt the silence and feared what it meant. The house stood still, a hollow shell bathed in pale morning light. No smoke, no flame, no body, only an emptiness that hummed like a temple after all the bells have stopped ringing. They stood at the gate, whispering prayers under their breath. The elder crossed herself 3 times and clutched her neck talisman. One monk tried to enter, but stopped mid-step, knees buckling as if an invisible weight pressed him back. It was the Mofi who finally stepped forward, face calm, eyes full of things no one else could see. He didn't ask permission, he didn't speak. He simply walked up the creaking steps, barefoot, fingers wrapped in red cord. He paused at the doorway and bowed, then entered the house of the dead. Inside, there was no furniture, no shrine, no coffin, no cradle, only a scorched pattern on the floor, a blackened spiral of ash surrounding a single, delicate footprint. Small, perfect, facing inward. In the center, a bowl of custard, still warm, untouched. He placed a candle beside it, lit it, and waited. Outside, the villagers asked questions. Was he still there? Was she? Did the baby ever exist? The Mofi answered none of them. He only said, "The house is empty, but something stayed." That night, the villagers burned what was left, out of fear, out of tradition. The flame caught slow, then climbed fast, a red tongue licking through floorboards, memories, bone, cloth. No one cried,
No one chanted, they just watched, as if to ensure whatever was within could not escape again. The Mofi remained until only smoke and soil were left. He sifted through the ashes with his fingers, found a wedding ring, melted halfway, the inscription still visible, always Nari. He wrapped it in white cloth, buried it beneath a tamarind tree known for swallowing the names of widows, then walked home without looking back. Years passed. The story faded into folklore. Children whispered about the woman who never left. Tourists asked about the cursed house and were told it never existed. The land remained empty. No one rebuilt there. Even animals gave it wide space. But on certain nights, especially the 9th night of the lunar cycle, the wind carried strange sounds through the trees. A lullaby, low, sweet, and the sound of footsteps in circles. Some say it's nothing, a superstition, an echo of grief so loud it left a scar on the land. But others believe love can rot, and grief, when fed too long, becomes something else, something hungry, something patient, something that remembers your name. One day, a traveler passed through the village, asked about the house that used to stay there. The elder shook her head. No house there, just ashes and silence. The traveler frowned. But I saw a light last night, and a woman, pregnant, holding a baby. She smiled at me. The elder turned away, eyes wet. Then don't go back. Because if she smiled at you, she thinks you're next. And far away, beneath the tamarind tree, a tiny voice whispered, "Papa,